So y'all know I've come to terms that I don't know who gave me AIDS or HIV, right? So today I got a message about an interview that I should watch. And this interview happened to include a celebrity man that this man has been with me and everybody else doing the same thing with it.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Push through those legs. Come on, push. Stand up. Push through those legs. Come on, do it. Push those legs.
The whispers started quietly, but now they're impossible to ignore. Sources inside the Brooklyn Detention Center, where Sean Combs is being held, just confirmed something that changes everything we thought we knew about this case. He's been receiving HIV treatment since the day he walked through those doors. But here's the thing that nobody's talking about. The treatment he's getting behind bars doesn't even come close to what he had access to as a free man. That's why he looked so different during his court appearance, so worn down and frail that people barely recognized him. Everyone assumed it was the stress of facing justice, but the reality might be far more complicated. And it gets darker because there's a woman named Gina who's been sharing her HIV journey online, and the timeline of when she caught the virus lines up perfectly with her time in New York doing exactly the kind of work that Diddy's indictment describes in detail. Gina isn't a household name, but her story has captivated hundreds of thousands of people on TikTok. She started documenting her experience with HIV back in 2022, taking her followers along on a journey that most people couldn't imagine surviving. The worst part isn't just that she contracted the virus, it's that she lived with it for 8 years without knowing. 8 years of her body deteriorating, of feeling sick and not understanding why, of losing mobility and control over basic functions. By the time she finally made it to a hospital, the virus had progressed to full-blown AIDS. Her weight had plummeted to just 65 pounds. Her muscles had atrophied to the point where she couldn't walk, and she'd lost vision in one eye completely. She described running headfirst into walls because her body wouldn't respond to what her brain was telling it to do. She lost control of her bowels and couldn't make it to the bathroom on her own. Within 2 weeks of being bedridden, walking became impossible. The transformation from a functioning young woman to someone who needed help just to stand up happened faster than anyone could have prepared for. But here's where things get interesting. Gina lived in New York during the time she contracted HIV. She was homeless for a period, struggling to survive, and by her own admission, she would engage in intimate encounters with celebrities to make money. She needed cash quickly, and she found a way to get it that put her in rooms with powerful men whose names she still won't say out loud. Now, if you've been following the Diddy case at all, you know that New York was ground zero for his operation. The federal indictment laid it out clearly. His infamous multi-day parties happened in 4 main cities: New York, Los Angeles, Vegas, and Miami. New York was where it all started, where he had the most control, where he knew he could operate with impunity. The indictment talks about these events in disturbing detail, but one thing it never mentions is protection. Not one. There's talk about thousands of bottles of baby oil, about drugs being transported across state lines, about coercion and manipulation, but nowhere in those legal documents does anyone mention condoms or safe practices. That absence speaks volumes about how these encounters actually went down. Gina has been careful not to name names, and there's a specific reason for that. She's building a legal case, and she knows that one wrong move could jeopardize everything she's working toward. But recently, something triggered her in a major way. She posted a video explaining that she'd been told to watch an interview featuring a male celebrity she'd been intimate with for years. Not just a one-time thing, years. She said she actually had real feelings for this person, which makes the betrayal cut even deeper. According to Gina, this interview painted him in a terrible light, and it brought up memories of police involvement due to inappropriate conduct that she brushed off at the time, but seeing everything laid out again, hearing about his history with transmitted infections and how he'd been with countless other people while doing the same things he did with her, it became impossible to ignore. She broke down talking about waking up and having her whole day ruined because she can't stop wondering if this person is the one who left her half blind and fighting for her life while he continues living without consequences. The frustration in her voice was real, the kind of pain that comes from knowing you might never get concrete answers but being unable to let it go. She said she can't make assumptions because it makes an ass out of you and me. But the timing of this video, right when Diddy's name is dominating every news cycle, didn't feel like a coincidence. The pattern doesn't start with Gina, though. It goes back decades, and one of the most disturbing chapters involves Usher Raymond. Most people know Usher as an R&B legend, but fewer know the full story of how he got his start. When he was just 13 years old, L.A. Reid made a decision that would change his life forever. He sent this child to live with Diddy for a year in what was literally called Puffy Flavor Camp. Let that sink in for a second. A grown man running a camp for teenage boys, and the industry saw nothing wrong with it. Usher has talked about this experience in interviews, and even though he tries to keep it light, you can hear the discomfort in his voice. He described waking up in Diddy's house, surrounded by women and wild parties, seeing things that a 13-year-old had no business witnessing. When asked if he understood what he was looking at, he admitted he didn't, but he knew it was pretty wild. The interviewer pushed further, asking if Usher would ever send his own kids to something like Puffy Camp, and his response was immediate and definitive. Hell no. That answer tells you everything you need to know about what really happened during that year. There's a video that resurfaced recently where Diddy almost exposes more than he intended. He's talking about his relationship with Usher, reminiscing about the early days, and he starts to say something about them waking up together. He catches himself mid-sentence. You can literally see the moment he realizes what he's about to reveal, and he throws in a pause before backtracking and changing the subject to frosted flakes and brotherly competition. But the damage was already done. People heard that slip, and combined with everything else that's come out, it painted a picture that's hard to unsee. Then there's Usher's 2005 interview with Essence magazine, where he made a comment that seemed innocent at the time but reads very differently now. He said he was saving some stories for a book he might write one day, and then added, "I'll put it this way, there was a lot of sex." Those words hang heavy when you consider that he was a child during the time he spent with Diddy, and children shouldn't have stories about adult situations that they need to save for future tell-alls. The connection between Usher and health issues runs deeper than most people realize. Back in 2017, a woman filed a lawsuit claiming Usher gave her herpes without disclosing his status. She said she started experiencing symptoms, did some research online, and that's when she discovered articles linking Usher's diagnosis back to his time with Diddy. According to her claims, she got tested and the results confirmed her worst fears. This lawsuit might have seemed like isolated drama at the time, but it fits into a much larger picture. An email allegedly from one of the publishers who was working with Kim Porter before she passed away leaked online, and the contents were explosive. It detailed what was supposed to be in her memoir, including claims about Diddy's relationships with men, footage of those encounters, and specifically mentioned him giving Usher an infection when he was still just a kid. The email also referenced a confrontation between Diddy and Usher's mother, which suggests she found out what happened and tried to intervene. Kim Porter never got to publish that book. She was found dead in her home before it could see the light of day, and the official story about her passing has never quite added up for people who knew her well. She's not the only one either. Erica Kennedy, another author who was working on exposing Diddy's secrets, also ended up dead before her book could be released. The evidence keeps stacking up, and Cassie's testimony adds another crucial piece to this puzzle. She stood in court and described years of being forced into situations she never consented to, of contracting multiple infections because protection was never part of the equation. She talked about how her body eventually became resistant to certain treatments because she'd needed them so many times. Think about what that means. Someone's body becoming immune to medication because they're repeatedly exposed to infections from the same source. The indictment mentions baby oil in bulk quantities talks about supplies being purchased and transported, but never once does it mention contraceptives being part of those supplies. When you're reading legal documents that detail every aspect of how these events were planned and executed, that omission becomes glaring. It's not an oversight, it's evidence of how little regard there was for anyone's safety or well-being. The math isn't complicated. If you're having unprotected encounters with multiple people over the course of years, across multiple cities, with new partners being recruited regularly, the chances of transmission go from possible to inevitable. Gina's situation has improved dramatically since those dark days when she weighed 65 pounds and couldn't stand on her own. She's up to 100 pounds now, which might not sound like much, but for someone who is literally wasting away, it's a massive victory. She's relearning how to walk, going through physical therapy, rebuilding muscles that completely deteriorated during her illness. Her CD4 cell count has improved significantly because she's been religious about taking her medication, which means she's no longer detectable for AIDS, just HIV. If she maintains her treatment regimen, there's a real possibility she could become undetectable for HIV as well, which would mean she couldn't transmit it to anyone else. But the physical recovery doesn't erase the emotional and psychological damage of not knowing who did this to her. She's made it clear that she's determined to find out the truth, and once she has confirmation, she plans to take legal action. The problem is that HIV can take years to show up, and tracing it back to a specific person becomes nearly impossible without concrete evidence or admission. She's playing a waiting game, gathering information, watching interviews, and looking for any clue that might give her the certainty she needs to move forward with the lawsuit. The pattern that emerges when you look at all these stories together is impossible to ignore. Multiple people across different time periods, different cities, different circumstances, but all connected by one common thread. Cassie's testimony about repeated infections, Usher's childhood trauma, and the lawsuit that followed him into adulthood. The publisher's claims about what Kim Porter was going to reveal, and now Gina documenting her journey online, while dropping pimps about a celebrity who fits every single detail of the man currently sitting in federal custody. The legal system moves slowly, and proving transmission is incredibly difficult, but the weight of circumstantial evidence creates a picture that's hard to dismiss. What makes this even more tragic is watching someone like Gina fight every day to rebuild her life, to walk again, to regain her independence, while the person potentially responsible for her suffering was living freely until very recently. The injustice of that reality, of victims bearing lifelong consequences while perpetrators continue unchecked, is what drives people to demand accountability even when it seems impossible to achieve. Whether Gina ever gets the confirmation she's looking for remains to be seen, but her determination to find the truth and seek justice represents something bigger than just her individual case. It represents every person who's been harmed by someone with power and resources, every voice that's been silenced, every story that's been buried because it was inconvenient for the wrong person to be held responsible.